Hello and welcome to another Magic Arena video. I'm your host Kevin and you are watching Rational Magic. Today we're going to be jumping into the Throne of Eldraine, beginning with a pack opening of at least 50 cards. Most of this is going to be brand new to me as I have tried to avoid most spoilers. Some of the cards I'm familiar with, but I wanted to have a clean slate for my own introduction to the set. Some of you might be wondering about a hiatus that I took from the game. I've been pretty sick the past week and I'm finally bouncing back from that. And so here I am, and let's dive into it. All right, Throne of Eldraine, 52 packs. We may add a few more to that. We have a little gold saved up. This will be good for 4 best of 1 Throne of Eldraine drafts. But unfortunately, they're not available for probably about the first week that the set has been released. So we'll have to be starting with Throne with traditional draft, which is actually my preferred way of playing the game in best of 3 format. Definitely is more rewarding of skilled players and mitigates a lot of the randomness associated with the game. I might try out some sealed, but this is not a play mode that I particularly enjoy. Traditional draft is definitely preferred. This might actually be better for a lot of people as an introduction to the format, as it's a little bit less intensive, especially if you're unfamiliar with a lot of the cards. You can kind of just throw a deck together more simply and play it out and get a feel for the format before you have to make some of the tough decisions that come with playing the traditional draft. But anyway, let's dive into this pack opening. And as I said, a lot of these cards are going to be brand new to me, so you'll have to bear with me as I do a on-the-spot evaluation and see how this goes. All right, pack 1. I'm going to avoid covering a lot of these commons, as it will take far too long if I analyze every single card. Let's see what we have here. 3 mana, 3 damage, any target. Adamant. I believe one of the new mechanics. I don't think I've seen Adamant on cards before. 3 red mana was spent to cast a spell. It deals 4 damage instead. And this is one of the themes of Eldraine, is the monocolored decks, something they're really trying to push with Adamant. And it's kind of, it's not that interesting of a mechanic being forced into playing monocolor by having a slightly better effect to a spell. It's fine, I don't hate it, but yeah, not the best reason to be excited for a new set. Here we have the dual color cards. You can spend alternately a blue or red in the mana cost, which is pretty nice. I always like these sort of flexibility attached to a card. So for 4 CMC, 3/2 with flying. Whenever Lock Dragon enters the battlefield or attacks, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Okay, so a little bit of so you discard and then you draw. So that's rummaging traditionally in Magic. Pretty neat. Kind of an okay card. Pretty good limited. Yes, Castle Lochwain. The castles are pretty sweet. This is something that I want to pick up in paper for a lot of my constructed and commander decks. And they're pretty powerful. A 3 mana tap to draw a card is very efficient. One of the more efficient draw effects that we've seen attached to a land. With, of course, the downside of losing life equal to the number of cards in your hand, which will probably be ideally 0 or 1 after you draw the card, I guess. But pretty manageable. You don't expect to have a lot of cards when you're late enough in the game that's kind of resource generation matters a lot. But that's a pretty sweet pickup. Definitely something I'll be playing. What do we got here? All right. Another Slaying Fire. Red Cap Melee. 1 mana instant, 4 damage target creature, planeswalker. If you hit a non-red permanent, you sack a land. Okay. Kind of a dangerous card to use if you end up in the red matchup. Something that will have to be sideboarded in a lot of decks. But 1 mana for 4 damage is insanely efficient. And this is probably worth the risk of running into the red v red matchup. I like this a lot. It's very good. Let's see. We got some knights. Menace with Adamant, the mono black knight. Enchantment that gives you toughness on creatures, creates food tokens. Food tokens are pretty underwhelming. Spending 2 mana to gain 3 life is not an amazing use of your mana or resources. I kind of feel like food tokens are going to become more powerful in decks that have artifacts matter synergies just by pumping these onto the field and possibly using them for other sources and payoffs. But the food tokens by themselves are pretty underwhelming. We've seen there are some cards in the deck that interact with them, which is pretty nice, but I'll have to wait and see how powerful these actually are. I don't expect to be picking cards for the token effect, the food token effect, a lot in limited. So we got some basic lands here. Tapped unless you control one or more islands. It's pretty nice. I like to see non-tap basic lands, something that'd be in the game more of. Should be in the game more. Be good to see. Enters the battlefield untapped, you may put target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard on top of your library. And tap for 1 mana. Okay, that's pretty sweet. That's pretty sweet. So land that recurs instant or sorcery with a very manageable effect. Yeah, I can see this being very main deckable. Very good in construction. Excellent value spell in blue. I'm kind of surprised they printed a basic land this powerful, but it's definitely pretty awesome. Yeah, pretty exciting. Fling. Oh, is this fling for fling? Sack creature, deal damage equal to the sack creature's power. This is kind of an infamous finisher spell in red. Something that can be particularly broken if you have powerful combat effects. I'm kind of dreading the person who plays double or triple. Is it Cycle of Growth that gets +3 and then +3 again each time you cast the same spell? Followed by a fling. This sort of effect can lead to pretty insane burst wins. Definitely a card you gotta watch out for. Out Muscle. 4 mana, put +1 counter on target creature control, then it fights creature. Adamant. Gains indestructible. So, 4 mana fight spell with +1 counter attached. Pretty mediocre. It's okay. Something you can run. Let's see what the rare is. Lockmere Serpent. 6 mana, 7/7 with flash. Pay 1, sack an island. Can't be blocked. Pay a black, sacrifice a swamp, gain 1 life, draw a card. 2, exile 5 target cards from opponent's graveyard. Return from your graveyard to your hand. Activate only anytime. You can cast sorcery. It is very strange being able to scroll a card's text. I guess gotta do what you gotta do. I wonder if this is just that tiny bit smaller in paper. It's so strange. This card is slow. It's hard to see it being a staple of constructed. Giving it unblockable is pretty nice, makes it a solid win condition. It will generally kill something when it enters the battlefield with the flash effect. 7/7 is going to kill just about anything in the game. It's powerful. Doesn't excite me that much, but we'll see. We'll see if this finds a place. Definitely a bomb unlimited. What do we got here? Alright, another knight here. Let's open up the rare. Sundering Stroke, 7 mana, 7 damage divided as you choose among 1, 2, or 3 targets. If 7 red mana was spent to cast a spell instead, Sundering Strike deals 7 damage to each of those permanents and other players or players. Okay. So ideally, in the mono red deck, this becomes 7 damage to 3 targets. Can hit face. I think it's pretty important for this spell that it's able to finish off a player with that 7 damage. It's hard to evaluate how powerful a card is at 7 mana, as it's an extremely high cost. This isn't as good of a finisher as Love Axe. It's flexible, board wipe removal in red, which is pretty strange. This sort of effect you like to see in a splash red color, but it's obviously meant to play in mono red. It's high payoff. It can end games. But it's a little too slow, I think, to be a card to watch out for. 2 mana enters the battlefield, creates a food token. Whenever you sacrifice food token, you may pay 1. If you do, look at the top 2 cards and put one of those permanents into your hand. This is kind of sad. It just creates a food token. It requires you to have an additional source to be able to sack them. Then you have to spend 1 more mana, and you get to draw cards. It's a lot to invest a card for the potential of being able to draw cards later in the game, only when you've combined it with other effects. This card is entirely dependent on the strength and number of good token sack effects you can find elsewhere in the game. It's a very hard card to evaluate by itself. Incredibly reliant on how food tokens end up being in the meta and as a whole. +3 enchant, reach. Another one of our adventure cards. Queen of Ice. So 2 mana sorcery, adventure, tap target creature. It doesn't untap during its next untap step. Then you can cast it as a 3 mana 2/3 creature. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, tap a creature. So it's a 2 mana sticky tap attached to a 3 mana 2/3 that can potentially sticky tap something. I guess this card kind of being 2 mana to adventure and 3 mana cast plays well with the 2 sides of the effect. You can turn 2, sticky tap, play it turn 3. Turn 4, when you're able to attack, that creature will untap. So they better not have blockers, or you better have some tricks to get this through. A lot of these adventure cards feel, well, this being uncommon is deliberately not super powerful, or being a common card. But in general, a lot of the adventure cards, they feel a little bit understated in their effects and their efficiency, but a lot of that is due to having 2 different effects attached to a single card. For the sake of balance, it seems like when designing these cards, Wizards of the Coast had to make them a little bit less powerful with their individual effects, just for the sake of balance in the game. When you combine 2 different cards together into one, it can be quite strong in terms of resources. But it leaves this kind of underwhelming feeling. I shouldn't expect to be impressed by a common, and there are probably going to be some rare and mythic cards that are pretty unfair, but we'll see. We'll keep an eye out for those. Alright, we got the red basic land here. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 3 or more other mountains. I wonder if all these effects are the same. I might have misread the last one. So 3 more other mountains. And it creates a 1/1 dwarf creature. This is almost a little bit of anti-synergy. This is hugely valuable for any kind of land to have an effect like this. Just creating a body by itself is pretty awesome for something that a land can do. But being a tap land with such a stringent effect of having to have 3 lands on the battlefield prior is pretty harsh. I don't see this being constructed worthy. It is nice though. And they have to be mountains. It only works in the mono red deck. What I was going to say is that the sort of deck that wants a ton of 1/1 tokens, the go fast aggro red deck, generally doesn't want to draw into a 4th land. They're usually good on 2 or 3 and then just land ramping from there. Or sorry, they're just going off from there with cheap and efficient creatures. But perhaps with the amount of draw effects that are in mono red, this will get to trigger more often than I expect it will. But it's a bit odd. This seems to be an anti-synergy with the benefits of having 1/1 dwarfs that you can dump on the battlefield. But that being said, it's always great for your lands to have additional effects. Seeing Queen of Ice again. Monocolor Artifact, which is just a 3/3 when you jump through hoops. It's pretty sad. 1 mana, 1/1 flyer. The Adventurer for 2 mana gives something +2/+1 and gains flying. So it's a combat trick that ends up being a 1/1 flyer. This is the sort of thing that I think could be a little bit more powerful than it looks like at first take. It's not an amazing combat trick, as your creature could very easily die, and then you're just trading 2 for 1. You're losing card advantage if the card you cast it on trades, but in the end getting a 1/1 flyer. Still pretty underwhelming. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token. That seems really powerful. Very efficient. A 2 mana enchantment that dumps out 1/1 flyers with only the clause of drawing an extra card, which is very easy to do in these colors, very easy to chain. The second effect of 6 mana, draw a card and discard, is pretty bad, pretty inefficient, something you'll almost never use. But I like the enchantment by itself. This is very, very efficient, and I think this could see some real play. Let's check out our rare. That is being overlapped by the game's interface. Oh no, oh no. Okay, we'll go back to that one. All right. Pretend that didn't happen. All right, whenever you draw your second card each turn, gets +1/+1, gains first strike during the turn. I think I clicked because I'm so used to being in matches. The way to maximize a card or bring it up larger on the screen is you right click and then it gets bigger. And I clicked and the card went away. So we'll have to kill that habit before it becomes a problem. This guy, yeah, just pumps when you draw a second card. Pretty okay. Not an awful stat line. Vigilance and mana fixing for 2. Okay blocker. You'd have to be pretty desperate for your third color to play this in limited. Only place it's meant to see play. Three mana draw spell. Creates food token. Could be good. Thrill of Possibility. This is the sort of effect that I'm looking to play in the decks that want to bin things into the graveyard. I'm thinking specifically Rakdos. They have some payoff cards for putting things in your graveyard. The mythic rarity Chalice is something comes to mind. If you want to deliberately bin things, this could be an okay cantrip. 2 mana is still probably too inefficient for a cantrip, but something to keep an eye on. Resolute Rider, 4 mana, maybe white or black. 4/2 Knight, 2 to give it lifelink, 3 give it indestructible. The power level of this is good. You have to be in an aggressive deck to want something like this, as it dies pretty easily and it has a high cost to keep it on the battlefield. Spending 3 mana every turn means you're not really doing a lot otherwise. But in a tribal knight deck, this might be enough to close out the game, and the ability to keep it around within a powerful effect like indestructible is pretty strong. It's weak to a lot. This is a card that dies to many things, especially weak to negative stat removal cards, but is probably good enough to close out in those low to the ground tribal decks. And Fairy Vandal. This guy was highlighted in some of the events that predated the release, predated the release of the new set. So most people are probably familiar with this card. if they're playing towards the end of September. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, it gets +1/+1 counter. This is a card that definitely has potential to grow. It's not a hard clause to meet. It has flash, meaning it will have synergy with the very popular Simic Flash decks that I think will stick around. I think there's enough power in those decks, despite what they're losing, for Simic Flash to still be something that people at least try to make work. I think this is going to be a powerful card. Alright. Once Upon a Time for 2 mana. Card I have not seen. Instant speed. If this spell is the first spell you've cast this game, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. Okay. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land from among them, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library. So it's 2 mana, sort of a cantrip. It allows you to fix for lands or flexibly pull creatures out of your deck. Pretty good in green, pretty good in limited, where you have a lower card quality in general, and you're really searching for those big bombs, especially in green. Excuse me. Something you want to draw early. Being able to do this for free is pretty awesome. But it's hard to say if we see this card making the rounds in a constructed format. It's nice. Nice effect for limited. Brimstone Trebuchet. 3 mana, 1/3, defender, reach. Tap, deal 1 damage to each opponent. Untap whenever knight enters battlefield. Okay, that's a very cute, very slow defender that pings for damage. You probably want more powerful creatures if you're really going into Knight Tribal. But common, so it is what it is. Four mana 4/2, that will potentially draw you a card if it deals 2 damage to something you control. Might be okay as an aggressive card that cycles itself. Another adventure. Allows you to rummage. I get rummage and loot mixed up, but this is rummage, pretty sure. Good old 1/5 reach, pretty hard body to get through. A 7 mana common. Adventure for 4. Harvest Fear. Target opponent discards 2 cards. Fact we've seen many times. If you get to play this at the critical moment of a game, it can be very powerful. But later in the game, typically the effect of forcing your opponent to discard loses value by a pretty large amount when you see it later in the game. For that reason, a lot of people are of the opinion that you shouldn't be picking these kind of effects in limited environment. The reason, as I described, because it loses value later in the game, which is interesting that this comes as a late game creature, because that kind of circumvents the inherent weakness of a discard ability like this, which makes me like it quite a bit more. Forcing your opponent to drop their last 2 cards can sometimes win games. If they're holding on to those couple bombs that they just haven't had the mana to cast, they can definitely change the outcome. And so the creature, whenever Reaper of Night attacks, defending player has 2 or fewer cards in hand against flying to the end of turn. Okay, so very often this will be a 7 mana 4/5 flyer. Huh. This is an intriguing card. I think this is actually quite playable. However, 7 mana is still a lot. It's still... In a lot of games you don't even get to 7 mana in limited, or if you do, by the time you're there, the game has been mostly decided, but a 4/5 flyer is enough to win games. It's an okay blocker on the field. This is the case where neither effect is very impressive by itself, but them being combined together actually has quite a bit of synergy. Yeah, I like that a lot. Okay. It's a common that excites me. This is a direct counter to Storm style play. Not something that's been big in the format, but I guess we've seen a lot of cards that want you to draw additional cards every turn, which are hit pretty hard by this, but this will definitely just be a constructed sideboard card to counter a very, very specific deck if it ever reaches too high popularity. I think this is a card that might have been printed for other formats as well. Just another way to shut down some of the more, I wouldn't even say oppressive, but some of the more popular cantrip style decks. Yep. 1 mana, claim the firstborn. This is an effect that we've seen a lot, but not at 1 mana. Cards like this are generally a lot more powerful if you can combine them with sacrifice outlets, which there definitely are in red and black. So we'll have to see how easy it is to find those cards. Because this could be very powerful. It could just be a 1 mana kill spell with some kind of benefit when you need to sacrifice things. So a card that has potential but by itself is pretty underwhelming. Very efficient at 1 mana, something to keep an eye on. Alright, this card I have seen. It was one of the first cards that was spoiled. The Stonecoil Serpent. An X mana spell with reach and trample. Protection from multicolor. Enters battlefield with X+1/+1 counters on it. This is a card that I think is pretty awesome. It could be a sleeper in the format. Protection from multicolored is pretty relevant. There's a lot of very good multicolored spells that came out in the 2 Ravnica blocks that we saw. Things like Mortify won't be able to hit this card, and dual colored creatures won't even be able to block it. They won't be able to touch anything that this is doing. I like it a lot. I think there's a lot of potential for pay-X spells to be good. I have to see if this has synergy with the Hydra. It has synergy with discount spells as well, being colorless actually. If you have something like an Ugin on the battlefield, it's like you're adding 4 counters on the creature for free, which is pretty awesome. I think this is something that could definitely find a home. Just being a colorless spell, it's extremely flexible. The protection doesn't even have to be the reason you're playing it. It's just a powerful text to have on the card. And reach and trample are 2 very nice keywords to have, both defensive and aggressive. This is something that I really like. Alright. This might end up being a long video. We shall see. I go pretty slow through these analysis, especially because it's the first time that I've seen a lot of these cards. This is kind of cute. Outflank, a go wide, very efficient removal spell. Loses a lot of value when you're don't have a good board state, which is a big negative for the card, but it's efficient enough and easy enough to play around that I like this card quite a lot. It's something people will probably see coming, being a common effect. It's something that you should know your opponent might have if they're in white. Alright, tap 2 creatures, or 3 mana, 2/3 flyer. Again, this plays nicely with itself as it's a turn 2, turn 3 play. Tapping things on turn 2 isn't really a benefit to you most of the time. So it's more so a statted flyer on 3 that can be a denial trick, a combat trick later in the game. Either tap down your opponent's blockers or prevent them from hitting you for lethal. This is a card. These sort of dual effects I have a lot of trouble evaluating. They're inherently powerful because it's 2 cards in 1. The flexibility of the card is powerful. But again, both these effects are pretty underwhelming. A 2/3 flyer for 2 is fine. That's something you always want in limited anyway, but definitely not a constructed card. Weapon Rack enters the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it, and you can tap to move one of those counters at sorcery speed. Okay, pretty underwhelming. It'd be much better if this was not sorcery speed. Yeah, draws 2 cards, loses 2 life. Probably something we'll see played. This was another card that was featured in the Brawl matchup. One of the events, the Brawl events that happened earlier in the game. Frogify is actually a notable card. 2 mana to sort of polymorph something. Enchant a creature, loses all abilities. It's a blue frog creature with base power 1/1. There are a lot of drawbacks typically to this card. As being a 1/1 creature, they can still use it to chump block or even use it offensively. It doesn't actually remove the creature from the battlefield. But where this becomes really strong is actually in Brawl format, when you can turn an opponent's commander into a 1/1 frog instead of removing it from the battlefield and giving them the opportunity to cast it again can actually be really nice. And then this is actually really good in the flyer deck because you can attack without worrying about the opponent chump blocking it. Not a super powerful card, but efficiently enough statted. Removal that you're happy to see in limited format, and it has the niche usability as being able to shut down other opponents' commanders in the soon-to-come Brawl format, so that'll be pretty exciting. And enchantment, it actually fits nicely in the Dimir deck that way. Ooh, 4 mana Questing Beast of Mythic. Vigilance, Death Touch, and Haste. Questing Beast can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. That's pretty nice. Combat damage that would be dealt by creatures you control can't be prevented. So it specifically counters the Root Snare style of decks. And I don't know if any decks are running a lot of those effects right now, but it's something that can potentially be quite good. I don't think even Gates decks are running that sort of damage prevention, but we'll see if that ever becomes popular. Whenever it deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to target Planeswalker that player controls. Okay, Planeswalker hate, something I'm always happy to see. Preferably in all colors. So it's pretty efficiently statted. Vigilance, Death Touch, Haste. It's an aggressive and a defensive creature that really can't be blocked by anything. Very powerful keywords. Well, yeah. Can't be blocked without dying, is what I mean. It's hard to see exactly where this card fits. It is undeniably powerful. It's such a general use card. It's like they just mashed as much text together that they could, and which ended up in being a very powerful mythic card that doesn't have much good reason for being there, in my opinion, of course, not a fact. Okay. Yeah. Why not? Why not play this card? Planeswalker hate, efficient stats, good keywords, can't be chump blocked. Which means very often a 4/4 has the weakness of very often being double blocked by weaker creatures, and that's why it's less good in combat, but because of the clause can't be blocked by creatures power 2 or less. This will actually be quite a bit better than your typical 4/4, because 4/4s are often lose to the double block, which this thing it's almost guaranteed not to happen. They have to block it with something at least equal to its size. Yeah, okay, something to play. Powerful card. It doesn't feel like it has. They're trying really hard to give this card a theme. They're pushing it very hard. Mythic, legendary creature, beast, questing beast. Like this is the big theme of this set. Is going on quests, and they kind of just end up with this powerful but mashed together blah thing. So, yeah, I'll play it. I'll be a little bit confused every time. Drown in the Loch, Dimir, 2 mana spell. Choose one. Counter spell with CMC less than or equal to the number of cards in its controller's graveyard. Okay, so you're benefited by milling your opponent. It's actually very weak on turn 2, but gains power later in the game, which is a strange thing for a 2-mana instant. Alternately, destroy target creature with CMC less than or equal to the number of cards in its controller's graveyard. Again, I would love to see this card if it had the reverse effect. Sort of. Like, it would be nice if the destroy effect was something that was good in the early game, and the counter spell was something that was good later in the game. Instead of just being the exact same clause twice. A 2-mana card that's always better later in the game and you don't want to draw is pretty awkward. There's definitely potential with this card to have, like, it's a choose one effect. You would expect a choose one effect to not be flexible with based on the exact same condition. It's flexible because inherently, because there's 2 effects. It's not a flexible card because both of those effects are determined by this graveyard anti-synergy. Really weird. Seems like a really weird flavor card, but we'll see how this performs. A much needed sacrifice effect for tokens. Really the only way that food tokens will be good is when you're taking advantage of them through other cards and other synergies. The spending 2 mana to gain 3 life is a pretty sad payoff. Okay. I actually like this a lot. It's a pretty decent combat trick. Just giving something +3/+3, it will typically survive that trade. And then ramping it up to a 5/5. It's pretty nice. I would play this in limited. I'm a little bit more fond of combat tricks than I've seen from other Magic players, but I like it. So 4 mana 2/5 with Adamant. If you play it in mono white, it's a 4 mana 3/5. They're pretty well statted, actually. I could see this filling out the curve in a limited white Knights tribal, or even white-black, but with an emphasis on white. Okay, Idyllic Grange. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 3 or more other planes. So I must have misread the earlier blue card. 3 or more is a pretty large requirement for a card like this. Too often it will be a tap land earlier in the game. Especially, that hurts decks more that are being aggressive and need to be doing things early in the game. Like a white deck that's trying to go wide with knights or something similar. Enters the battlefield untapped, +1 counter on target creature control. Yeah, all these effects are powerful. It's just, it can't be understated how much playing a tap land with 0 benefit hurts you. And the temples are a good exception because scry is incredibly useful, and dual lands are a necessity of being in dual or multicolored decks. In that case, you kind of have to take the pain of playing tap lands just for the sake of having a consistent mana base. But yeah, being a 4th land is still a pretty high cost. Alright, 5 mana 4/4, which is sometimes a 5 mana 2/2 that can't be chump blocked. As so far, Adamant is pretty boring. I like the fantasy theme of the set so far. I like what they're doing with interesting lands being printed at low rarity. I'm not a big fan of tribal, but tribal decks are cool thematically, but pretty boring archetypes to play. And this Adamant effect for a tiny benefit, forcing you to be in a monocolor, is just seems really bland to me. But let's see what the rare is. So we got a Gilded Goose, our replacement for the Llanowar Elf. 1 mana 0/2 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, create a food token. Spend 2, tap, create a food token. Tap to sacrifice a food, add 1 mana of any color. So it's a one-time use Llanowar, but quite a bit stronger body. Being an O2 flyer is definitely relevant. Not sure how that is going to be a payoff or if it will, but it's a stronger body by far. And another card that's entirely dependent on how strong food tokens end up being. As a like primary mechanic of the deck, it probably will be strong. There's definitely cards that will make this a viable goal to play around, feature to play around of the set. Creating food tokens for 2 mana is actually a pretty okay thing to be doing with your mana later in the game instead of floating when you have those extra sources. But spending mana to ramp is an extremely control-oriented strategy, a very slow and inefficient strategy. But yeah, we may just... Everyone may play this card because we no longer have Llanowar Elf, and having a turn 1 mana worm is very powerful, so see how that goes. Another Vandal here, pretty good flyer. Pretty easy to get into pump. 4 mana, 2/3, black or red. Menace creature, spend 3. Sacrifice another creature or artifact, and here we have a good, well, potentially good payoff for food tokens. Deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker. So you can hit face. You have to spend 3 mana to deal 2 damage, and ideally sacking a food token. Yeah, not very efficient. Not a very exciting reason to be in this kind of sacrifice deck. But it's a mana sink, and mana sinks are good. Mana sinks are better in limited when you have lower quality cards and you need something to do with the extra mana, because you can't reliably have resources throughout an entire game of limited. So I rate it more highly for that format, but still not a very exciting card in my opinion. 5 mana 3/4 flyer is always a good stat line. Something that'll see play. Forever Young, 2 mana sorcery. Put any number of target creature cards from your graveyard on top of your library, draw a card. Huh. So 2 mana, loot something, and then kind of stack your draws. This card I actually think has a lot of potential in the black deck that's trying to bin as much as they can from their library. This just guarantees that you're going to have something useful later draws in the game, and just trades itself for one of those creatures that's been previously killed. I like this. It's a cool effect. Alright, our rare is the Stormfist Crusader. This is one of the cards that was awarded at the beginning of the new season, of the new set release. 2/2 with Menace, beginning of your upkeep, each player draws a card, loses 1 life. I think this is probably a card that I'm underrating. It's a symmetrical effect of drawing a card for each player. You get to draw the card first. Definitely meant to play it in a aggro style deck, as it's an aggressive body, and you're hoping that extra damage pinging each turn is enough to bring you closer to the win before your opponent has a chance to use the extra cards that they're drawing. So the idea behind this card is that you have a low to the ground aggressive deck that's able to make use of everything you draw quickly and efficiently, while your opponent, even though they're gaining card advantage, they probably can't play everything out of hand. And that's the kind of the rationale behind this card. Being an aggressive body, it can probably swing in for damage quite a bit itself. 2 mana is a competitive slot. Something I'm willing to try out. We'll have to wait and see if this card is strong enough to be competitive worthy in the Rakdos aggro decks. I have noticed in my experience that I want a more powerful card on 2 mana in Rakdos. It's kind of a weird spot to fill, so yeah, this might see a home. It's synergistic enough. It just feels bad to give your opponent cards, but I think it works. All right, big old turtle. Another target attacking non-human creature can't be blocked. So this is pretty cool. I actually like this card a lot for limited. 1/5 turtle is a good blocker to stall the game, and then it has the benefit of giving something unblockable. It definitely could use something to. It needs some kind of combat trick to keep this alive generally, but I like it just having a. It slows down the game, being a good body, and then it can turn a large creature into a win condition by preventing your opponent from chumping it or delaying that damage or attack. It's a nice card. I think this actually could synergize pretty well with a lot of other cards. Definitely weak stats, but that's what you get for being a common. It's a turtle I like. Destroy creature with CMC 3 or less. Very simple. Very efficient. Definitely playable, limited. It's a sad replacement for some of the other removal cards at 2 mana that we've seen be popular, but definitely a playable card. Equipment that creates food tokens. It's very 3 mana to equip is a lot. 2 mana to play, it's fine. Yeah, not a fan of equipment in general, but with the right strategy, they can be very powerful. I like equipment more in decks that have inherent evasion, like flyer decks. This actually gives you no real benefit for hitting face, other than extra damage. Definitely, probably something I'll be avoiding, but could work in the right deck. Oh, thank God. Okay. So 7 dwarves, 2 mana, 2/2. Gets +1/+1 for each other creature. Name 7 dwarves you control. A deck can have up to 7 cards. So this card is kind of a flashback to other things that Wizards have been printing. They like to print on cards. You may have any number of cards of this with the same name in the deck. We've seen a few like that. The rats, the 2/1 rats that gain +1 power for every rat in play, were infamously just bogged down every single restrictive format they tried to make. The problem with having cards that say you can have any number of them in the deck is that overrides the ruling of formats. So you're playing Commander, your opponent can have 99 rats if they want. Obviously, they need lands, but the point holds. I definitely am of the opinion that it detracts from the game when a player can break the restrictions of the format because Wizards made a stupid card that says format doesn't matter. This card is an exception because they specifically said you can have up to 7 of them. Good. I think this is actually pretty playable and limited if you can pick up a few of these. 2 mana 2/2 is not exciting, but is something that you need in an aggressive format just so you don't get run over. And then it becomes a 2 mana 3/3 or a 2 mana 4/4. It very quickly gains power. I think this could be an excellent card if you see it enough being passed to you in draft format. I had to go on a little bit of a rant there. I really just like when Wizards prints rat-esque cards that just break formats for no other reason than, I don't know, trying desperately to be interesting. Witch's Oven. Oh, this is a very cool card. 1 mana artifact, tap it, sacrifice a creature, create a food token. If sacrificed creature's toughness was 4 or greater, create a food token instead. So, Witch's Oven is not very impressive by itself, but there is a very cool combo with a cat, a 1 mana 1/1 cat they printed that I believe it comes back into your hand whenever a food token is created. So there is a recurring loop of sacrifice effects that are made that are enabled by the Witch's Oven artifact, which is something that I really want to experiment with in the format. There seems to be a pretty cool aristocrat deck floating around, probably in mono black colors, but definitely something I'm looking forward to experimenting with. And Witch's Oven is one of those cards that will enable a, not enable, but in combination with other cards, you can create a infinite loop of sacrificing sacrificing creatures to create food tokens, and then creating food tokens to recur creatures in a specific case. What do we got? Another castle land. These are all pretty awesome. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a forest. Very, very reasonable condition. Something that doesn't detract the value of this card by much at all. Taps for green forest, or spend 4 mana, tap, add 6 green mana. Spend this only to cast creature spells or activate creature abilities of creatures. So what this is doing is you basically go from 5 lands to 6. So once you reach the point where you have 5 lands in play, you can ramp yourself to 6 mana, which is a pretty late in the game effect, but can, specifically in green, can help you get those super beastly payoffs on the battlefield when you haven't been fortunate enough to draw your 6th land, which is something that happens quite often. The likelihood of you drawing lands goes down the more draws you have. So in a way, because resources are limited, not that your deck has a lower percentage of lands overall. Wicked Guardian 4/2 can cycle itself. Equipment +1/+2. When you draw your 2nd card each turn, attach Mantle of Tides to target creature you control. Cool. 1 mana artifact that has a way of equipping itself to stuff. I still don't know if I would play this, but I like that you're not bogged down by having to spend 3 mana to equip, and it's a pretty easy effect to pull off. Opt reprinted, and this is going to be pretty key for a lot of decks. We've seen a lot of cards so far that are pushing this multiple draw on a turn effects, and these sort of 1 mana cantrips are pretty important for those strategies to work. This is an effect that has been popular across Magic. Even the super competitive decks in wider formats like Modern play cantrips, play 1 mana cantrips, because it enables a lot. The Scry is very nice. I definitely expect this to be something we see played. Nice. 2 mana 0/4 Defender. Pretty good stat line for blocking early in the game. And you can tap to give your creatures haste. I like this a lot. I think it's pretty playable. Got our 3 mana Knight again. Pumps Knights by 1. Travel decks are very simple. Glass Casket. This is a very excellently themed card. 2 mana artifact. Enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls with CMC 3 or less until Casket leaves the battlefield. So you play this in a deck that wants some kind of artifact payoffs, and it just is an early mana removal spell. It's not an enchantment, which is actually pretty key, because a lot of white decks rely on enchantment removal, and being an artifact, this is actually quite a bit more difficult to remove in colors other than green. Green generally has a flexibility of targeting an artifact or an enchantment, but in the most case, people don't have ways to deal with artifacts, or they don't main deck those kind of strategies. So I like this a lot as an early game kill spell, and that will, I think, stick around. I guess Mortify is still in the format. That's the downside of this, but if the opponent spends a Mortify to gain back their 2 mana creature, you're probably happy about that in general. It's not an efficient play for them. Castle Ardenvale. Enters the battlefield tapped, less than control planes. Tap it for 1 1 planes. Spend 4 mana, tap, create a 1/1 white human creature token. This is great. This is exactly what white go wide decks need, as a way to refill the board and have something to do later in the game after the opponent has dropped a board clear. So this is something I definitely expect to be played. It will be dependent on how popular a white or white splash anything really go wide decks are, but it's very nice as having something to do later in the game with your mana. So powerful card. Got our frog. 1 mana 2/1, when it dies, pump something. That's pretty awesome. This is really efficient. 1 mana 2/1 with an upside is pretty good in a tribal aggressive deck. I expect that to be played. One mana scry 2, 4 mana draw 2 cards. It's slow, but it's not terrible. You can sack it at instant speed, which is actually pretty nice if you're holding on to other interrupt or counterspell like effects. 3 mana, blah blah blah. Here we go. Dealing 3 damage is much better at ending games than a lot of these similar ping effects that I've seen. This could potentially be something to watch out for as a way to end games. In black, in limited, not in constructed, but could be good. Okay, 3 mana, pull a card, exile it. You may put that card... What? Oh, you may put a card that has adventure that player owns from exile into that player's graveyard. Okay, so this is Adventure Hate. It's a 3 mana... actually, I forget the popular term for the 3 mana hand hate cards, but yeah, pull something from the hand and then exile an adventure. Could end up being relevant. I don't know if I'd main deck this in a limited format, but has potential. 2 mana, Sorcerer's Spyglass. That sounds very familiar. I'm thinking this is been printed before. Enters the battlefield, look at an opponent's hand, and choose any card name. Activate abilities of sources with a chosen name can't be activated unless they're mana abilities. Yeah, so this is a hand hate card that just prevents enter the battlefield effects or activated abilities. Interesting. It's a lot. To spend a card just to remove activated abilities is a pretty hefty price. This is a very specific card to be used in a counter matchup. It's a very specific sideboard card. We'll see. I can't think of the case in standard where this sees playability. But it probably has in wider formats. I suppose you could target Field of the Dead with that and prevent Field of the Dead from creating zombies. And it's colorless, so it could go in any deck. That might be a good enough reason to use it. Yeah, that seems like Field of the Dead hate. It's pretty legit. Okay. Righteousness acts like a 1 mana kill spell. Actually, I like that a lot. Can only be used defensively. So not the most flexible card, but that's something I'd play. Again, 1 mana, deal 4 damage. With a clause that can't be read or you sacrifice a land, pretty efficient. I like that a lot. 1 mana adventure, add 1 mana of any color. So we have mana fixing attached to a 3 mana dork. So yeah, it could be playable in multicolor decks. Not particularly impressive. But anything that allows fixing in those sort of formats could be pretty key to some strategies. Most of the payoffs we've seen so far are promoting monocolor decks. So I don't know if there will be a lot of splashing, but people are typically at least in 2 colors in limited. Enchantment that buffs creatures. Put a +1 counter on target creature if it enters untapped. Okay, bake into a pie. Pretty thematically fun card. 4 mana kill spell creates a food token. The Arya Stark of Assassinations. Kind of fun to see. Definitely very playable at 4 mana as an indiscriminate kill spell. Ooh, I wish the top wasn't covered up. This is really looks bad. Anyway, the Clackbridge Troll. That is Clack, right? Yeah. Clackbridge Troll. It's a 5 mana 8/8 with trample and haste. Whenever he enters the battlefield, target opponent creates 3/0/1 white goat creature tokens. Beginning of combat on your turn, any opponent may sacrifice a creature. If that player does, tap the Clackbridge Troll. You gain 3 life and you draw a card. I actually love this card. It's it's got the most adorable goats that are destined to be slaughtered, unfortunately. But this is a card with a lot of synergy in sacrifice-oriented decks, sacrifice payoff decks. And the opponent, having trample and haste, the opponent is pretty much forced to start sacking things immediately, or else take the pain. The opponent cannot tap this down on your turn, so it means you have an 8/8 blocker if you need it from turn 5 on. The stats on this creature are so awesomely powerful. I definitely think this is going to be a very fun card and a very powerful card in a specific deck. And they can't just tap it down by sacking creatures. They're giving you life and drawing, which is pretty awesome. It means that even if the opponent does tap it down for the sake of being able to negate your body on their own combat phase, you still have life gain and you have additional resources. I think this is great, and I look forward to playing that. Nothing else noteworthy here. Vantress Paladin. Another adamant card. 2/3 Scry 2. I actually think that's pretty nice. It has the Knight synergy attached to it. 7 mana for a defender. Spend 7 mana, and it's a 7/7 trample. Who can attack? Yeah. You need a way to discount that. Spinning Wheel, tap 1 mana of any color. Pay 5 to tap something, so an overpriced Icy Manipulator. But attached to a pretty flexible mana artifact, something we'll probably see in the Brawl format as a nice mana fixer. Something people will be picking up in Limited, just to guarantee they have the correct mana. It's nice having the flexibility of being able to tap things down, even if it is pretty expensive to use. Good dual use card. 3 mana 2/2 flyer. Each creature you control that has an adventure enters the battlefield with an additional +1 counter. Excuse me a moment. Okay. Sorry about that. Let's... Oh, come on, game. Alright, we'll figure out what that card is later. Another adventure card here. +2 power combat trick. Or a 3-1 that can't block. That's pretty pathetic. I don't like that at all. Three mana, create a 2/2 vigilance. 5 mana, create a 3/3 vigilance. Again, it's a pretty sad card in general. The Lonesome Unicorn. But I might be undervaluing these cards simply due to the power of having multiple cards attached to one. The Knight creature synergy might be, I don't know, it might be good, but yeah, don't like these at all. Memory Theft, Hand Hate with attached to adventure removal might be important in the format. I haven't really seen any super great adventure cards so far. Awesome. Gonna craft a mythic. Two mana, Crystal Slipper. 1 to equip, +1 power and haste. The haste is actually pretty relevant. This is an artifact. This is an equipment that's a little bit more relevant. Haste can be a surprise swing the opponent was not able to prepare for. So I like this a lot more than the other equipments we've seen so far. Good theme to it. You can run from the ball when no one suspects it. Suspects? Yeah. Pretty bad combat trick. In general, even though you're able to kill things, your card's going to trade. You kind of 2-for-1 yourself. Sometimes it's necessary if you need a way to remove something off the board, or if you're lacking removal effects, but not too impressive. Can't attack or block. Activated abilities can't be activated. Nice prism spell. Pretty playable and limited. We have our Scry. This probably feels pretty good to play on turn 1. This card's actually growing on me. Having some kind of draw is nice, especially in a control-oriented deck, which blue typically is. The 1 mana Scry I like a lot to fix your future draws. Kind of guarantees you're going to be doing something relevant in those somewhat crucial opening turns of the game. I actually like this for the consistency of the format. Just something I may end up picking up. You have to be pretty heavy in blue to justify playing a 1 mana blue spell, as having this in your hand and not having blue mana on the battlefield is pretty awful. Trying to find turns to play this between turn 2 and like turn 4 is going to be a little bit awkward. If you're not casting this on turn 1, it is often something you're going to hold in your hand, but I guess it's not too relevant until you need those cards anyway. 2 mana, legendary, Siren Farron the Henge Hammer. A 2 green 2/2. Whenever Farron the Hedge Hammer, I just want to say Hedge Hammer, and that just sounds hilarious. Sir Farron the Hedge Hammer. Whenever he attacks, another target attacking creature gets +X till the end of turn, where X is Sir Farron's power. So by himself, he's a 2 mana 2/2. When he attacks, he pumps something by 2. Pretty good. He's gonna die. He needs other combat tricks or creatures to protect him, but it is a very powerful effect to have on a body. It's cool to see these legendary cards add in common, as it will be pretty relevant to limited format, as this guy is going to be kicking around. People are definitely going to pick him. It's fun. I like this. I like the potential of this card quite a lot. It's like when this is on the battlefield, your combat tricks, it's like you're copying them when you play them. You can hit this guy at sorcery speed, and then during combat you can pump something. It can't be used instantly. That would be pretty insane. It's kind of a finisher in that way. I'm trying to think how you would use this card. Ideally, you enchant it, I guess. You give it the 4 mana +3/+3. It becomes a 5/5, and when it attacks, it gives something 5/5. It's probably going to be a very powerful and common synergy with this card in limited format. Both of those are pretty low rarity effects to pull off, and some of the enchantments are pretty low pick rate. If you see this, you're probably going to be able to find ways to make it work. 5 mana 3/3 trample haste. Burning Yard Trainer. And its battlefield, and their target knight you control gets +2/+2 in trample and haste. So 5 mana 3/3 haster that has the synergy pump spell. It's good enough to see in a deck. It's nice that it has haste itself. Yeah, this will probably... I don't know how good red is in the knight decks, but this is good enough to see play. I'm pretty like uninterested in a lot of the knights that we've seen so far, just by the nature of being creature tribal decks. They're not very interesting. They just make them bigger and then they hit people for more damage, and that's how you play the game. I guess it appeals to some people quite a bit, but not my style. Hey, and we get a rare crafting. Pretty nice. Always good to see those. The 3 mana. This is the Rummage card. Pretty good body attached to it. Trying to think of what, like Mind Rot is the 4 mana. Force an opponent to discard 2 cards. There have been a ton of printings like that. This is probably something I'm going to experiment with. 7 mana might be just too much for this to ever have a relevant effect on the game with the secondary ability, but I like this a lot for pre-described reasons. So we'll be trying that out. 2 and 2 on lifelink. It's an alright creature. For 1, you gain X life. Each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of knights you control. This is pretty nice. 2 mana, pretty decent body. Just because it has lifelink, if this goes unanswered for a few turns, it can tip the scales in your favor, and then it just doubles as a kill spell later in the game. A big problem with playing these kind of like cheap creature aggro decks is that once the board state has stalled out and the opponent has adequate enough blockers, you're not really doing anything, which is where a card like this serves a very nice purpose as just being a kill spell later in the game after you've stalled out. I like it a lot. I think this is going to be pretty key to knights winning games, and being at common, you'll be able to pick it up really easily. So this is the sort of dual effect that has synergy with itself that serves a purpose, and I'm pretty interested in. Similar to Reaper of Night. Silver Flame Squire, 2 mana, 2/1, or a 3 mana instant, +2/+2. So it's a combat trick that untaps a creature and pumps it for 2, which is usually pretty relevant. Being able to untap things can often gain you a good kill or a good trade. But a 2 mana, 2/1 soldier is pretty awful. You're not getting much value at all out of the creature, and it doesn't have knight synergy. And I wouldn't play this just for being a 3 mana combat trick. I think that's kind of a little bit too slow. So not something I'm looking to play. This is a high synergy card. You always have to be careful about playing enchantments, as if your opponent has access to a kill spell, then you're losing your silk card advantage. But the power level of a card like this is pretty high. It could potentially allow you to swing for lethal, and if it goes unanswered, it's going to be pretty painful for your opponent. Very similar to, but harder to pull off, I guess, than we saw a green enchantment. I think it was in M19 that gave a creature +1/+1 for each land you controlled. It's another card that was like super punishing if your opponent could answer it, but would just take over the game if they couldn't. So there's probably a deck where we'll see play. It might be the commander deck. 4 mana, 3/2 flyer, protection from white. Creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless your controller pays 1 mana for each of those creatures. This is pretty sweet. These are some awesome effects. It's a 4 mana 3/2 flyer is fine. It dies to a lot of spells, but I think that's necessary for having a flyer that's powerful at the uncommon level. Protection from white will in some cases be extremely relevant, as a lot of the flyers are going to be in white or blue. So stopping your opponent from blocking, or simply having a tough blocker in the air, could be pretty good. Yeah, I like this a lot. This is a pretty ideal card in a Tempo Flyers deck where you need your opponent to be a little bit slower than you are as you push for lethal in the air. So, strong card. On our second Sundering Stroke, 7 mana, deal 7. I'm really starting to doubt that this card has a home. I suppose it is a game ender in a mono red deck for 7 mana. There are better ways to end games, maybe not unlimited. But this is a card that is I'm liking less and less as I see it more. Exile target artifact or enchantment, draw a card. Okay. It's a good answer to enchantments if they get out of hand. Very slow, but at least you're getting a card out of it. Generic 2/2 pump knights by 1. In white-red is a little strange. It seems like a lot of the more powerful knights are in black. But maybe we end up with a 3-color deck. I don't know how they could have consistent enough lands to be an aggro 3-color deck, but might happen. Witch's Vengeance, 3 mana. Creatures of the type get -3/-3. This is a very powerful removal. Minus counters, not counters, but minus to stats. Gets around things like, gets around protection because it's not targeted. It gets around indestructible. If the creature's at 0 toughness, it will die anyway. Sorcery speed is fine. This is a very powerful effect that is only relevant in tribal matchups. But I suppose even casting it as a 3 mana kill spell is okay. It does have that flexibility onto a single creature. Yeah, I like it. It's going to keep tribal down. It's something necessary for the game. We do have Ritual of Soot. We have there are a ton of board wipes in the format. It's not like this had to be printed, but it is very good. Witch's Cottage. Enters untapped, you may put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. So it fixes a draw. It's fine. Fixing a draw is okay. 4 mana, put 2 counters on something, 6 mana, create a 6/5. I think that's playable. Not too exciting. Two mana 2/2 that pumps by 1 and you play an adventure spell. I don't think you'll get this to trigger very often, maybe once or twice in a game. Pretty underwhelming. When it enters the battlefield, if you control an artifact or enchantment, return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. For a 6 mana 4/5 that is able to bounce. Yeah, could be relevant. It's kind of weak for 6 mana, but these sort of effects, bounce effects, are always going to be relevant to the game. The blue, oh man, the blue hate counterspell. That's what we need to see more of. Blue players hating on blue players. It's exactly what I want in Magic. If you discount it down to 1 mana, it becomes a 1 mana leak, which is counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. Mana leak might be 4. Not sure about that right now, but It's a pretty efficient blue hate spell. Power to you. 4 mana Wicked Wolf. When it enters the battlefield, it fights but a 1-target creature you don't control. Sacrifice a food to put a +1 counter on Wicked Wolf. It gains indestructible to the end of turn and tapped. Okay, it's pretty flexible wolf. There are a ton of powerful 4 mana creatures in green. Almost too many to choose. It's kind of insane how stacked this mana slot is in green right now. Very good spell. We've seen there are a ton of food counter synergy cards in the deck. The weird thing is the cards that generate food counters generally suck, and I don't want to pick them. And then you have something like this that's awesome when you have food counters available. And so you're going to end up in drafts where you see one of these in like pack 3, and then all of a sudden you're punished for not having chosen crappy token cards. And then you're going to have drafts where maybe you deliberately choose food token cards and see none of the payoffs. And it's this weird balancing act of, hey, maybe I'll get something relevant in a later pick to make my cards good. Or maybe I won't. Like, I think you have to see something like this early enough in the game, and you have to be aware of the consistency of pulling them. It's really hard to say how often you're going to get food token synergy cards in draft format to justify choosing the payoffs. I don't know. Good luck, guys. Good luck drafting this format. Savvy Hunter, 3 mana, 3/3. Attacks or blocks, create a food token. Sacrifice 2 food tokens, draw a card. This is fine. This is like a okay statted card that has a side effect of creating food tokens. I would pick this and I would play it if I was in the right colors. Because you can only find things that will benefit you from having the tokens, and you're not hurting your deck by putting this in. So this is what I want to see more of. And I probably won't, but we shall see. Kenrith's Transformation, 2 mana enchantment. Enters the battlefield, draw a card. Enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a green elf creature with base power 3/3. This is really good. This is really good specifically in green. It's a color that has a really hard time pulling strict removal cards. And this is even better than, well, not better, but in a way better than removal, because it removes the card text. Loses all card types and creature types. Oh, maybe it doesn't lose card text. Loses all abilities, yeah. So basically. And is a green elk creature with base power, toughness 3/3. So usually if you're in green, your creatures are large enough that giving your opponent a 3/3 is not too much of a detriment to you. And the fact that it cycles itself is really nice because you're not losing card advantage. I think this is the sort of effect that green is sorely lacking and could be quite powerful. But if you're giving your opponent 3/3s, you're probably not running over them as soon as you would like. My hunch feeling is that this card will be very powerful. It's flexible, pseudo removal, in a color that has none, that draws you a card when you play it for a very efficient mana cost. And I think the downside could be played around pretty well. So I'll see how this card performs. I like it quite a bit. 2 mana, untap something. So this is the card that I was looking at earlier that Chai mistakenly read as comes in untapped if you control an island. But having 3 or more islands is quite a bit different. I think blue is actually one of the colors where this becomes more relevant, as having access to draw effects and cantrips means that you're going to have more consistent draws and you'll be able to more often play this as a late game land. I still am skeptical whether this will have constructed viability, but it's a powerful effect, being able to recycle one of your spells. Powerful effect in blue for sure. And then you have the repeated singular damage, very slow card, pretty weak stats. And we got another goose. As fate would have it, I guess I'm playing green ramp. That thing we all hoped was leaving the format. It's here. Witch's Oven. 5 mana for a 3/3 flyer. 5 mana for a 3/3 flyer. Spend 3, sack a food token to -3 something. That's pretty good. It comes late in the game, but this feels competitive. 3 mana, turning your food tokens into 3 mana kill spells is pretty nice. This is very, very slow, but it's a good body. And I think this might be a pretty solid card to have in the later in the game in black. Equipment again. Four mana, pump it. That's, I don't know. Play that in Artifact Matters, maybe. Incredibly slow. Fire's Invention. 4 mana, enchantment. You can cast spells only during your turn. You can cast no more than 2 spells each turn. You may cast spells with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of lands you control without paying their mana cost. I have a hard time envisioning this card as being competitive. You can't ramp with this. You can only cast things with low CMC cost. You can cast 2 per turn, and you're spending a card to do it. There are a ton of powerful things that red can do for 4 mana to gain them tempo advantage or card advantage. Like, this makes me... I want to compare this to Chandra on 4. That just straight up draws you cards and has the inevitability of being a win condition. I think there's too much that this card is competing with... Oh, sorry. I have not fully beaten the sickness, and it is kicking my butt, but I will do my best. Anyway, my conclusion on that card is I don't think it's competitive at 4 mana, being able to cast 2 spells with CMC less than or equal to your mana per turn. It's a very slight benefit. You're spending a card from your hand to do so, and you're losing out on card advantage by playing it. So you're trying to gain this tempo advantage of spamming things from your hand, and you're losing card advantage while you're doing it. Oh wow, that's a crazy effect. Want to see my face go Terminator? Yeah. Green screens are problematic sometimes. So I don't think that card's good enough to be played. Got our 4-mana Knight. Drown in the Lock. The very strange card that both options are only viable later in the game. Flying Creature Hate. That creates food tokens as a side note. It will depend on how many flyers are in the format and how strong those decks are, but this will definitely be a viable card. Something you would normally sideboard. But there have definitely been formats where I main deck Flyer Hate like this in green, and being able to create a food token without having an additional cost to it is pretty nice. It's cards like this that are already efficient and like decent that happen to create food tokens that are going to be good. It's not the dedicated token cards. Trapped in the Tower, our pacifism effect for white in the format. What? So tiny. Okay. 1 mana flash, enchant creature. Enchant creature gets -2 power. It gets -6 power instead, as long as its controller has 7 or more cards in their graveyard. So they're really pushing the mill synergy cards, which is kind of gross to me. I've never enjoyed playing mill style decks. And it's efficient being 1 mana, but it's pretty weak. Just dropping something by 2 power and spending a card to do it. It's pretty sad. Acclaimed Contender, 3 mana Knight. It's a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, if you control another knight, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a knight, aura, equipment, or legendary artifact from among them. Put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Yeah, that's awesome. 3 mana 3/3 knight that draws you a variety of things. Knight, aura, equipment, or legendary artifact. This would be way better if it said enchantment as one of those. Not sure which artifacts you're trying to pull with this. I guess in the previous set of M20, they printed a few powerful synergy artifacts, tribal synergy artifacts, which you'd be looking for, and you'd probably have a playset of in this deck, which inherently or coincidentally, maybe deliberately, cost 4 mana, so you can play it on the following turn. Yeah, this seems like powerful effect, something you want in Knights, and it has flexible mana cost, which is pretty important. Two and 2/2 lets you trade in your food tokens for +1 counters. Might end up being relevant. Kind of a filler drop for the 2 slot of the deck. Destroy target artifact. Enchantment. Exile card from graveyard. Return to nature. It'd be really nice if cards like this could target adventure cards. It would definitely fit the theme of the set. And it's something like this that you don't want to print dedicated cards to counter the adventure mechanic, as that would be pretty gimmicky and have no lasting value after the set rotates, or even have no lasting value in general. But on a card like this, where you have the generic effect of destroying an artifact or enchantment, you could just have the third option be remove. The funny thing is, in exile, remove an adventure. It could be like end the adventure, or like the adventure went poorly. Like thematically, they send this lone soul on an adventure to become more powerful. What about the guys who didn't make it? Like, not everyone's got the successful fairy tale, right? I'd like to see a card like this with a choose one option that was like their adventure went wrong. They did not find the princess, or the princess was a cannibal and they ate the adventurer. I, that's what I want to see in Magic. Anyway, all right, into the story. 7 mana instant spell. This spell costs 3 less to cast if an opponent casts 7 or more cards, has 7 or more cards in their graveyard, draw 4 cards. Okay, this is trying to be a 4 mana draw 4. Again, mill. Maybe some of you are excited by this. I just don't like mill. And yeah, 4 mana to draw 4 cards, pretty awesome. But don't want to do it. Linden, the Steadfast Queen. For 3 white mana, you get a 3/3 Vigilance. Whenever a white creature you control attacks, you gain 1 life. So, whenever a white creature control attacks. So this is going to trigger per instance of white attacking creature. So if you're in the sort of go wide Ajani decks, you can actually get multiple triggers off on Ajani in a turn for every individual creature who's attacking, including this card, and it remains untapped because of the Vigilance. So this card is here to push the gain life strategy in mono white, which I don't know if it has enough support to be a deck, but we have Ajani's Pridemate on 2. We have the Ajani Planeswalker that creates Pridemates on 4. This fills in the gap for 3. But I think like that deck wants to be into Angels. I think if you're playing Life Gain Tribal, you want everything past turn 2 to be Angels. But this is good enough and consistent enough that it probably fits the deck somewhere. Yeah, I'm willing to try it out. It'll be the replacement for the 3 mana Angel that creates 4/4s, maybe. Tournament Grounds. We have the Tricolor Knight synergy, so this kind of answers my question from earlier, whether they'll have consistent enough lands in a Knight deck to play Tricolor, and this is exactly what you need to make that happen. It doesn't come in tapped, which is pretty important. I don't think this would be nearly as successful if it was a tap land. So yeah, 3 color Knights, here we come. I think it's pretty playable and limited. 3 mana, deal 3 damage at instant speed. Something your opponent always has to be aware of and play around. What's our rare? Got another castle. Gonna create the 1/1 humans. Combat trick. 4 mana 4/3. Whenever Skullknocker Ogre deals damage to an opponent, that player discards a card at random. If the player does, they draw a card. Okay, so they need that extra clause so the opponent can't just draw cards if they have an empty hand. Yeah, that's a good enough body as a 4 mana 4/3. And it forces the... I don't like the randomness of this card at all. Not that it won't be competitive, it's just... Well, competitive. It'll be playable and limited, I think. But the fact is not very interesting. Charming Prince, 2 mana 2/2. Enters the battlefield, choose 1. Scry 2, gain 3 life, or exile another target creature you own. Return to the battlefield under your control, beginning of the next end step. Sweet. This is definitely an enabler card. We've, in the history of Magic, there have been some very powerful flicker effects where you bounce a creature from the battlefield and back. I really like the flexibility of this card. I don't know how much the life gain is going to matter, The consistency of scrying is good, and then later in the game, it's just a 2-mana flicker. It's as if this is a 2-mana 2/2 that copies the entry effect of another card that is already on the battlefield. And this is going to be a fun card to play around. I hope I can find a home for it, and that could be pretty fun. Charming Prince. Okay, we have the Storm Hate. Whenever Wildwood Tracker attacks or blocks, if you control another non-human creature, it gets +1 to the end of turn. I don't think green aggro is going to be very successful. And not when you have Knight's Tribal Synergy running around and with this much support. This is probably not something I'll pick up when I'm playing in draft. Adamant. Yeah. Return target permanent you control to its owner's hand for 1 mana, and it's a 2-mana 3/1. Not a knight this time, it's a peasant. While 3/1s are pretty easy to kill, if they remain on the battlefield and your opponent has land trouble or doesn't draw their early cards, you can get in for a lot of damage, sometime a game determining amount of damage with a 2-mana 3/1. And other than that, it's a 1-mana save spell. Which normally I wouldn't play in a deck if all this said was 1 mana, bounce something to my hand. I don't think that's strong enough, but being attached to a 3/1 creature, I think this pushes the line of being very playable. Ooh. The Hushbringer, that's really beautiful art. And creepy. Oh man. Villagers of Sherwood Forest, lend me your ears. Or your lips. 2 mana, flying lifelink 1/2. Creatures entering the battlefield or dying don't cause abilities to trigger. Oh, okay. So this is a 2 mana flyer that completely shuts down Field of the Dead. Or any ETB focused deck. This could be hugely relevant. Not very impressive stat-wise, but at least it'll often ping and gain you some life. Could be relevant enough to shut down certain decks. It's a sideboard card. The Hushbringer. Fairy Tribal actually could be a thing. It's something I wanted to try out. Sacrifice a food, target creature blocks. Ah. That's pretty good. So we have the aggressively statted 2-mana 3/1. If you can get this down early before your opponent's able to play stuff, you'll get a good chunk of damage in. And then you can, without paying any cost, you can sack a food counter, turn it into a cheap removal for one of their weaker but relevant creatures. This is a card that I think could be pretty good. And you can even like drop this turn 2, turn 3 Savvy Hunter, and then force kill one of their creatures. It is vulnerable to interaction. It's not as good as having a kill spell because your opponent can just play their own combat tricks or play around that ability. Our good old aggressive knight. Definitely going to see some play. Oh. Garruk, the Cursed Huntsman, for 6 mana. 0 loyalty ability, create 2 black and green wolf token creatures. When this creature dies, put a loyalty counter on each Garruk you control. -3, destroy target creature, draw a card. And the -6, you get an emblem with creatures you control, get +3/+3, and have trample. This is neat. It comes down pretty late in the game. It's very unlikely to survive if you're using it as a kill spell, because you're probably not playing hard control in black-green. It's more of a, more of a tech card. This is a fun card. I like this a lot, but I have a hard time evaluating whether this is actually going to be playable. Just having the flexibility of a permanent with removal might be enough. That doubles as a card draw. Puts down 4/4 in stats the turn you play it. Yeah, it's hard to say if this is going to be good enough to become a staple of Gruul, but it definitely looks like a fun one to try out. Put a +1 counter on each creature control. Adamant. They gain vigilance till the end of turn. Pumping a board can be strong, but not reliable enough to play in limited formats. Our 1 mana hijack, pretty nice. 3 mana create 2 1/1 humans. And then if you have 3 white mana spent to cast, you gain 1 life for each creature you control. So typically this will be like 3 mana create 2 1/1s, gain 3 life. And while these sort of token effects don't seem very powerful, it's definitely been proven in the past that being able to generate multiple tokens can be super strong if you have the right synergy cards. Like Ritual, but probably a little bit more powerful. It's going to be tough for go wide decks to succeed. Especially token decks. Wow, 4 mana 4/3 flyer. The Opportunist Dragon enters the battlefield. Choose target human or artifact an opponent controls for as long as an opponent. As Opportunistic Dragon remains on the battlefield, gain control of that permanent. It loses all abilities and can't attack or block. Nice. This is awesome. 4 mana 4/3 on a flyer is actually really amazing in stats. That might be a little less impactful as we have been quite pampered with the Phoenixes that have rotated out in the last set, I believe. They did rotate out, didn't they? I don't actually remember if they're Ravnica or an older set. But we've seen a lot of powerful flyers in the last year or two. 4/4 mana that kind of mitigate the power level of a card like this. The stats are excellent. Comparatively to other cards we've seen, it's not nearly as impressive. I really like the conditional removal, but you can you can expect that this will die at some point and your opponent will get the creature back. That comes with the downside of it re-triggering any enter the battlefield effects that it had. But this is great. I think this is really good. Inquisitive Puppet. 1 mana 0/2. Enters the battlefield, scry 1. Exile it to create a 1/1. Human creature token. So it's kind of a 1 mana 1/1 that scries. But it seems like this is meant to be played in just other artifact synergy decks. Where does this see a home? As a turn 1 play in the Steel Inquisitor deck, and you pump all artifact creatures, and then you can exile it at instant speed if you have to kind of refill the board. No, it doesn't even work. Huh. It's hard to see if this is going to find a home. But it does line up with a curve of turn 1, 2, 3 artifact creatures to all pump with Steel Inquisitor. So maybe it has a home there, but by itself, a 1 mana 1/1 that scries is probably not worth your time unless you can find a good payoff. Anything else new? The Ginger Brute. Who has that much dough? Like, come on. 1 mana 1/1 haste. Spend 1. Can't be blocked this turn except by creatures with haste. Spend 2, tap, sacrifice, you gain 3 life. Okay. This is a joke card. This is a very silly card that you probably shouldn't play. Yeah. So silly. And as enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature. Enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. So 3 mana sticky tap. Charmed Sleep. It'll see a home. Pretty typical card. 1 mana 1/1 flyer. Deals combat damage to a player. Each player puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. Okay, so this is a 1/1 flyer with the benefit of filling up graveyards, which we've seen a lot of cards that have a condition around the number of cards you have in your graveyard, you or your opponent. So this could be an interesting card to have some synergy payoffs. 1/1 flyer is fine, but you need a reason to play 1/1 flyers other than them being a body. You can be successful by just stacking artifacts and trying to aggro your opponent down, but it's a strategy that has some pretty big downfalls. Yorvo, Lord of Garenbrig. 3 mana. Enters the battlefield with 4 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever another green creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1 counter on Yorvo. Then if that creature's power is greater than Yorvo, put another +1 counter. Awesome. It's a 3 mana 4/4 that just grows. That's stupidly good. Yeah. So simple. This giant noble will be smashing face. Exile an artifact or enchantment, draw a card. One mana, make a food token. 2 mana, put a 1/3 down. Pretty sad. 2/5, that can be a 3/5. 3/6. As a 3/6, I'd play this. It's probably okay as a 2/5, but not anything interesting. Whenever you cast an adventure, instant, or sorcery spell, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. I feel like I'm reading this wrong. Whenever you cast an adventure... Oh, right. Okay. So, despite how this sounds, it only works on adventure cards. If it said adventure, comma, instant, comma, or sorcery, then it would work on those individual spells. So this is a tough to evaluate card. It seems pretty insane in a deck that can pull off enough of these adventure-like effects. But for the most part, they're largely irrelevant. We haven't, at least I haven't seen any really compelling adventure mechanics. And maybe this is the reason why. Like, if you print an artifact this powerful, it really restricts game design for what you can do with adventures. Because this would be insane. If there was anything like good to do with an adventure, this would just be the most nutty card. And maybe it is in some instances, but man, this has the potential to be nuts. This could just be a 2 mana artifact that copies your spells. Just copies all your spells. Which is nuts. But adventures kind of suck, so I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. Oathsworn Knight, 3 mana, enters the battlefield with 4+1 counters on it. So yeah, this is something they're doing. I believe there's an Oathsworn something in all the colors, and they're all 0 mana, 3/3, or 3 power, 3 CMC 0 mana creatures that enter with 4 counters, which is a disgusting stat line to begin with. A 3 mana 4/4, and it's a pretty like generic thing to have as an identity of the set in every color. But this guy's going to be insane because he has the human knight text. So he's a super aggressive body that has synergy with a very powerful tribe. When he attacks each combat if able. If damage would be dealt to him while it has a counter, prevent that damage, remove a counter. So he's a super big knight body that prevents damage to himself. And just goes for the steamroll win. The Cauldron Familiar. So this is the card I was referring to earlier. Enters the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life, gain 1 life, sacrifice a food, return Familiar from a graveyard to the battlefield. So you have the Witch's Cauldron, which can sack this to create food tokens, and then you can sack food tokens to return this to the battlefield, creating your infinite loop of each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And if you can have other triggers happening every time you sack something or every time a creature enters the battlefield, which there are definitely in the format, then you have a pretty cheap and reasonable 2-card combo. Yeah, that could eventually win the game. It's pretty cool. I'm really curious if it's possible to make that strategy work. If you can bog down your opponent and their game plan enough to just win off of sacrificing cats to the Cauldron would be pretty cool. Might be a fun deck to try out. Six mana, create 3 1/1s that become tokens. Not something you ever want to do for 6 mana. They are potential sack outlets, but you need a free way to sack these if you're going to spend 6 mana just to cast that. Stolen by the Fae. X and 2 blue. Return target creature with CMC X to its owner's hand. You create X 1/1 blue fairy. Creature tokens. This might be really good. I don't know. I'm really bad at evaluating bounce spells. But with a body attached to it like this and the potential to abuse pay X effects, this might be quite powerful. Your fairies being flyers is quite a bit more relevant than just creating 1/1s. This could be solid, but we will have to see. Shepherd of the Flock. Oakham Adversary. 4 mana, 2/3. The spell costs 2 less to cast if an opponent controls a green permanent, and it has Death Touch. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. This is the green hate. And even then, yeah. Sideboard card to screw over green decks, which really don't need to be screwed over. Creature focused strategies are generally something you can build around. It's okay as a 4-mana body. I think it is playable. And we pulled a second Questing Beast. The really silly block of text that does stuff. Sort of, but not really. Just a block of text. They wanted to make a powerful creature. Got another Improbable Alliance. Knight Synergy. It doesn't seem like you want to have red-white on turn 2 in Knights, but you have to cast this. Definitely feels like Knights are a black-white deck, but might be fine. Doom Foretold. 4-mana enchantment. Beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a non-land, non-token permanent. If they can't, they discard a card. They lose 2 life, you draw a card, you gain 2 life. You create a 2/2 white. Okay. So forces both players to sack their upkeep with the benefit of drawing you cards, gaining you life, and creating a token. The token cannot be sacked to keep this going. Okay, so it works for both players. Beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a non-land permanent. Or non-land, non-token permanent. Okay, they lose 2 life. They discard a card. You draw a card, you gain 2 life, you create a 2/2 white. Okay, this would be really strange if it wasn't have some soul benefit to you, but it does. This seems like it could be very, very good. It's a 4-mana enchantment that gains you life, card advantage, and tokens while sacking creatures symmetrically. Sacking non-land, non-token permanents. I can't really see the deck this fits in, but I think it has potential. That's a tough one. Like in a discard deck? In a discard synergy deck where you're dropping rats on turn 2 and you have like Basilica Orzhov and you're just controlling the board. And then you have, that's like an additional payoff for the discard things that you did. Huh. I don't know what happens if this is good enough that like just creature tribal, if just Knights plays this. Maybe they do. This is a weird one. This could be pretty oppressive. If you don't have an answer to this, you're not really taking the game back, I think. Seems powerful. Doom Foretold. It's cheap. It's powerful. It's probably going to ruin someone's day. Nothing too exciting there. Got our green castle, ramp from 5 to 6. Pretty solid. What do we got here? Revenge of the Ravens. Your opponent loses life for attacking you and you gain 1 life. It's like the exact opposite to Cavalcade of Calamity for 4 mana. This card kind of makes me wonder why I'm not playing Ill-Gotten Inheritance. But I guess it has a higher ceiling if they have to pay life for every creature. I don't like the stalemate this card creates if you do get your opponent to the point where they can't attack you or they lose the game. I guess they just scoop at that point, but it's a black control enchantment meant to punish aggro decks, who probably don't care about their life total anyway. I don't know if I want to spend a card on this in limited. And I don't know if it's good enough to be in a black attrition deck. It's thematically cool. I might try to make this work. But I don't know if this has a home. Non-human tribal buff. Gives +1 power and trample. Alright, we have our first rare adventure card, and this is going to determine a lot about the set, whether these cards are good. Or maybe not whether, but how good they are. 2 mana to stomp. Can't prevent damage, deal 2 damage to any target. Or 3 mana 4/3. That deals 2 damage when it becomes a target of a spell to their controller. Aggressive red creature, punish the opponent for hitting it. Doubles as a 2 mana, deal 2. Yeah, this is the thing. So you get your Lucky Charm on the battlefield. Turns this into a adventure 2 mana, deal 2 damage to 2 targets. Which is good. I don't know, it's underwhelming. There have been a bunch of cards. So many times in the set they've had, in Magic's history, they've created cards with these sort of mechanics where they have 2 different text on the card and they can cast it as if they're 2 different cards. This is nothing new to the game, having these dual-sided effects. They just fit it to the theme a little better with the adventure, like the adventure text, the adventure mechanic. This is good. It's a good aggro creature. Nothing that breaks the game or does anything too interesting. Three mana, 1/2 double strike. Dance of the Manse for 2 mana and X. Return up to X target artifact or non-aura enchantment cards with convert mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. If X is 6 or more, those permanents are 4/4 creatures, additional to other types. This is a pretty neat card. It's definitely a build around, but the amount of support that we've had for artifacts and enchantments in the set, I think this could see some legit play. I forget the name of the black-blue fairy commander, fairy legendary card. But this is definitely something I'd want to play in that deck, where you're just going all in on artifacts and artifact creatures. It could be fun. Dance of the Manse. Build around mass artifact enchantment resurrection. Burning Yard. Choose two target creatures. Control the different players. Return those creatures to their owner's hands. Bounce 2 things or 2 mana. It's fine. Instant speed makes this quite a bit better. You're a 4 mana 3/3 flyer. Yay, Adamant. Another Witch's Vengeance, 3 mana board wipe. A very strong card. It's a card that I want to make work. This actually enables some enchantment synergies that we haven't had before. It's something that has been pushed a lot in green-white, having some kind of benefit to playing enchantments. And this is the first time that I want to play enchantments as removal that cycles themselves and has some other benefit or synergy among my deck. This card is hurt by matchup quite a bit. If you're playing against red and you're just giving them 3/3s, you're probably not very happy about that. And our third questing beast. The game's speaking to me. You must play a deck of questing beasts. It's funny, I like trashed the thematic style of this card so hard, and now I pulled 3 of them. I'm really curious what the odds are of that. It's good, don't get me wrong, it's a very powerful card. It just seems like text vomit. Stoneclaw Serpent. Pretty great. Gonna have to take some time to theorycraft after I open these decks, these packs. Adamant. 5 mana, deal 5. Adamant, deal 3 to the opponent's controller. Or to the creature's controller. Yeah. You'll play it. If you want removal unlimited. Another Mythic Wild card. Very nice. Target non-artifact creature control becomes 0/0 artifact creature. Put 4+1 counters on it. Oh. Turn a food token into a 4/4. Bring to life. It's kind of awkward that the adventure cost is the same as the creature cost. I think that's pretty powerful. It's definitely something that I would pick up quite highly in draft. Just being a 3 mana 2/2 flyer is relevant. But you probably don't want to play this on turn 3 and then lose the benefit of having an adventure. I mean, you might, but not the ideal use of the card. When Overwhelmed Apprentice enters the battlefield, each opponent puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard, and then you scry 2. Yep, this is what they gotta print because they're pushing mill. Another Castle Ardenvale, I think the 3rd one we pulled. At some point my speaker's turned off. Another Spyglass. Very targeted control card. It's kind of the anti-control control. Sir Aelin, the Lion's Claw. 5 mana 4/4 first strike. When he attacks other creatures you control, get +1/+1. It's a pretty powerful card at the uncommon rarity. It's starting to feel like Knights are just going to take over the format as there's so much support for them, and if everyone's trying to build around food token strategies with really crappy creatures and slow plays, it's just going to make Knights decks that much better. Once upon a time. Our green anticipate that can pull lands. A land or a creature. Yep, I like it. That's pretty crap. Now there's Sir Aelin. Second Yarvo. We've been pulling some pretty amazing green stuff so far. We have double Goose. We have double Yorvo. We have triple questing, whatever it is, questing beast. Might have to be mono green. So 1 mana for a 2/1 equip. That is otherwise 5. Here we go. This is a very playable create a token card. The Fierce Witchstalker. Sorcerer's Broom. 2 mana, 2/1. Whenever you sacrifice another permanent, you may pay 3. If you do, create a token that's a copy of Sorcerer's Broom. How many 3 mana 2/1s do you want? It's a lot to set up, sacrificing your own permanents. It's a high mana cost to create a 2/1. This seems pretty weak. Got our rare crafting. Another Charming Prince. There's got to be an interesting ETB style deck that this runs in. Problem is, do you play a 2 mana 2/2 scry 2? Nothing new there. Love Struck Beast. 1 mana, make a 1/1. Or 3 mana, create a 5/5. Pretty solid. Really easy condition to meet in the right deck. 3 mana 5/5 is pretty good. It's really important that this is able to block, even if you don't have the 1/1 creature. It'd be quite a bit worse if that were not the case. Got our another tournament grounds. Blue anti-blue counterspell. And our third board wipe. Alright, reconnected. For the last 4 packs. Scorching Dragonfire. That's a common we haven't seen yet. Pretty good. 3 mana, deal 3 with an exile clause. It's a very nice card. That artwork is beautiful. Really nice. Eric Velhagen. Spectre's Shriek. Target opponent reveals their hand. You may choose a non-land card from it. If you do, that player exiles that card. If a non-black card is exiled this way, exile card from your hand. So this guy is very powerful. And it will lose you card advantage playing this. It's probably, I don't know if it'll see a home in standard, but a 1 mana indiscriminate hand hate effect like this cannot be understated how powerful it is. This might be something that sees play in Modern. If the deck can mitigate the losses. Basically, you're casting this to remove the best card from your opponent's hand and removing the worst card from your hand. It is a 2-for-1 in your opponent's favor. The effect is good enough that I think this might become something to be feared. Spectre's Shriek into Thought Eraser is going to be a pretty bad time. In a deck that goes second, you got to mitigate the card loss somehow. Going second will probably do it. So, Fervent Champion. 1 mana, 1/1, first strike with haste. Whenever Fervent Champion attacks, another target attacking knight you control gets +1 power. Equip abilities of your you activate that target. Fervent Champion costs 3 less to activate. So we have the equipment synergy super aggro creature. Yeah, this is probably efficient enough that it will see play. I'm not very excited by equipments in general. There's going to be some good ones in the set for sure, but yeah, they're just giving knights the tools they need, right? To really rush down your face. Oh, come on. What the? One click. One bloody click. And it puts the whole pack away. If I clicked here right now, the entire pack would just close. Anyway, we get another Shine Chaser, which is in the previous pack. Flying Vigilance, 1/1, +1 for artifacts, +1 for enchantments. Yeah, there's a deck here. The top end of this card is a 3 mana, 3/3 Flying with Vigilance, which is good, but nothing insane. Very efficiently statted. But the card does nothing really by itself other than being an aggressive flyer. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, deals 3 damage to any target. 3 mana, 0/4. Yeah. There's going to be a cantrip draw style deck that just burns everyone down. Another Doom Foretold. Yeah, this card scares me a little bit. I think it's going to be good. Oh, it sacrifices itself. Okay, I was thinking that this would just repeat. Go off every turn. That would be quite a bit worse. So if they get... That player can't. They discard a card. They lose 2 life. You draw a card. You gain 2 life. You create 2/2 white. Then you sacrifice Doom Foretold. So this just keeps triggering until someone can't trigger it. So if they have 0 cards on the board, this stops happening. For either player. So is the idea that you just cast this, and if all you have are tokens, then your opponent had to sacrifice something. You had to sacrifice nothing. You gain 2 life, create a 2/2 white, knight token, and draw a card. Is that how this is meant to be played? Flood out your tokens, force the opponent to sack something, and then draw a card, gain life, create a token. I see you want this card to finish on your opponent's turn, not on yours. I'll have to see this in play. And that's it. We opened 50 packs. Oh my god. If I had any more, I'd really have to fly through it. That took much longer than I expected. But I also took a pretty slow analysis of the cards that I haven't seen yet. Alright. Thanks for watching. I will in the future be doing regular content on the channel, so expect some uploads in the near future, and have a good one.